Alright, so today's Tuesday 1B, and I'm going to record a video because a lot of people are not in class, they're at home. And that might continue for a while, so I don't want to leave them hanging. I want to record stuff and post it, maybe start a playlist, maybe later do live things. We'll see what happens. But today I wanted to look at Unit 3, and somebody had a question about this one. 358, which is not starting from scratch. If you had gone through this, normally you'd see rectangle part 1 where you get length and width and multiply them, rectangle part 2, and then 3 says for this stuff you're going to ask the user what's the length, what's the width, then you're going to make sure they're the right type, do the right math, display them, again making sure they're the right type. So several steps, even though it's really just 2 or 3 things happening. So let's take a look here. Change it so the user gets to type, and then get them into variables with a little prompt telling the user what to do, and then do some math and then print it. So the hard part is this stuff. See how there's an int and a string, and that's because when you do input, the input function, it defaults to a string. It assumes that whatever you're typing in is going to be treated as a string, meaning that if you type some words, if it says what's your name and you say my name is Bob, then it's taking that like in quotes M-Y-N-A-M-E is Bob, you know, not treating it as a name of something or a value. It's just a row of characters locked in. But if you tried to take that for the next step and do math with it, it's saying, wait a minute, that's not what we're looking for. So if it said what is the length and you put 16, it's going to treat that like the 1 and the 6 as 2 characters in a row rather than like the value that we call 16. Now, that might sound a little weird if you're not used to this kind of stuff. Maybe you've seen similar ideas last year with JavaScript, but even if you haven't, it's the kind of thing that you can get used to and you can start to recognize. So let's say we were going to input something and we want to treat it as a value. We want to say, who cares about the characters? We want to treat it as a number. Then you put int in front of it and it says, hey, this stuff, we're going to be giving you a number and we want you to write it down as a number in the computer's memory. And the same thing for the other guy. Now it might work if you don't do that, but we'd be gambling. We'd be hoping that they kind of guess right. You know, Python often will do the right thing for you, but if it doesn't, you can just specify more directly. So now we're going to say, hey, take those 2 things and multiply them. Length and width can be multiplied because they're guaranteed to be numbers. And then perimeter, you can do the right stuff to, you know, add one, then add the other and the other to get the value for that. And then we're going to print them. When we print them, we want to turn it back into a string. So it's like they typed in a number, we turned it from string to integer and then back to string in order to display it. Okay, so if I hit run, I assume this will just work. Hey, it worked. Now, I didn't type this in. Maybe it automatically filled it in for me. But does one of you guys have one that's not working? Are you getting an error? Okay. The key thing, and this is why they built up to it by doing, you know, rectangle part 1 and part 2. The key thing is, yeah, we know how to get an input. We've done that on like the very first lesson of saying what's your name or whatever. But taking a number, making sure it's an integer, using it as an integer, and then when you try to print it again, you have to make sure it's a string. If you didn't, for example, if you took off this thing, it would say, hey, that's not the right type. It would say, can only concatenate string to string. So area in quotes plus the variable area is trying to take a string and an integer and put them together. And that is not going to fly. So this is really a question about types. You probably are comfortable with taking input because we've done that in a bunch of other ones, and you're probably comfortable with doing a times, and you're probably comfortable with printing, but the fact that we're going to take something that's going to default to a string, treat it as an integer, use it as an integer, then turn it back into a string, that's where it gets a little more interesting. So I would guess if you had an error with that, that's where it would be. Okay. Did anybody have a question about another one? All right. Then let's do a little preview. I don't want to make a super long video, but a couple more minutes. Let's do a preview of the next one. So the next assignment will be this. You don't have to do it today. It's not due today or anything. But the next assignment will be this one. Conditionals. So you're saying something is true or false, and then if it's true, we're going to go one way. If it's false, we're going to go another way. That's really basic, and we do it in English without code. Like on the pretest, the first question said, oh, if Sarah is going to carry more than 2 things, she's going to drive instead of walk. If it's raining, she's going to drive instead of walk, otherwise walk. We can do that in what they call natural language, but we can also do that in mathematical symbols. We can also do that in code, and this is showing you how to do it in code. Booleans are things that resolve to true or false, and then once you have that, you can use them for if. So you could say, for example, if x is greater than 5, do one thing. If x is less than 5, do another thing. If it's exactly 5, do a third thing. Okay. Comparison is what I just said, greater than, less than, equal, that kind of stuff. And logical operators are whenever maybe you have 2 things and you want to say this and this, or this or this, stuff like that. Often we need to check multiple. If you're thinking of it in terms of something we might have seen in your intro class, a flowchart. A flowchart is like, oh, this takes us over here, this takes us over here, and then it splits off again. You can kind of think that as like and. So like if you get past this and this, then you get to the third one. We're building on more and more branches. And then the final part has to do with, well, we've seen one type of number, that's the integer, but there's another type. Floating point is some amount of decimals after the integer, and whenever you have that, you often want to work with the decimal but not really display it, so you round, and then rounding is a good way to practice your true and false, Boolean, if type stuff. And of course, that's a whole universe where people have their own versions of rounding and debate exactly when you should do it and how much and all of that. But for a simple version, we can test it out here. And then at the end, there's a little quiz. I'm going to click on, let's just click on one in the middle. I'll do one example, and then I'll end the video so it's not super long. Because I know if somebody sees a video that's like 20 minutes, they're not even going to click at all. But if they see one that's 10, maybe. Let's just pick one of these right in the middle. Old enough to vote. Preview. So it's going to say, ask the person for their age. We might need to turn it to an integer. We'll see. And then use a little bit of logic, like if it's over the limit, one thing, if it's under the limit, another thing. Okay, so how are we going to get the number? Let's say age equals int input. What is your age? It might work without the int. Not sure. Might as well just go ahead and throw it on there. And then we're going to say if age is above, what are they saying? If it's at least 18. So greater than or equal to 18, then print you are old enough to vote. If not, and the word they use in Python for that is else, then print sorry buddy. Is that going to work? I don't know. Maybe the automatic grading will not like that, but let's run it. Oh no. Why is it not liking this? Sometimes they want you to do a space and make a separate line. You don't have to, but let's see if that works. No, it's still not liking it. I wonder if we put it in. Oh, this line is fine. See, here's the thing that happens sometimes, which is that it'll tell you an error on a line, but it's not that line. I already see what's wrong, which is that the previous line needs another parenthesis, and now it's going to be okay. But this is killer. Whenever it tells you, like, line 3 is the problem, line 3 wasn't the problem. It was saying that the parentheses were still open, and so it was failing to interpret this the way it should. Now if we run it, I think it'll be okay. Hey, we got that. Let's try it below. Hey, that worked too. So what we're going to do is take some stuff, work with it. This time, instead of math and printing, it's going to be comparison, which I guess is still math, and then give a result. Question? Okay, so I'm going to end this video now so it doesn't become too long. I'll post it for the people. I'll post an assignment that says, hey, do Unit 4, but it's not due anytime soon. And we'll go on. Thanks.